Now then, final monkey here. Welcome to the first of my top tens. And for this first one, I picked a really difficult one, I think, and that is my top 10 albums by former Beatles. Reasons I say it's difficult, twofold really. One, I think the Beatles were just, like any band, you're talking about four very, very different people. The fact that four working class kids from Liverpool actually met up and combined, and that they had such complementary and such talents and such abundance of creative energy, and they created some absolutely they broke the mould and then created some of the most outstanding work of the 1960s in popular and rock music. That's incredible in itself. But these are four very, very different people. So trying to compare one with another in their post-Beatles work is, it's daft really, but it's just a bit of fun. So I'm going to give it a go. But the other reason I've made this much more difficult than it needed to be is that in order to mitigate against any bias or prejudice I had, because we all have our favourite Beatle, don't we? Our least favourite Beatle, is it sort of quiet and spiritual George, or is it angry and cynical Lennon, or is it nice and sweet Macca, or is it quirky and funny daft Ringo? We all have our favourites, and I wanted to try and mitigate against any bias, so I foolishly embarked on a methodology that is fatally flawed, which was to analyse every song, listen to it at least twice, and try and rate the individual songs, and then add up the totals and divide it by the total number of songs on the album. And it's led to me having sort of all sorts of sheets with scores and notes, and I've got about 10 of these sheets. And of course that is absolutely foolish, because an album, an LP, it's not a disparate collection of songs. It's the best albums anyway are a coherent, or an attempt to be a coherent piece of art in itself, and that's as a whole, and the sort of whole vibe that it creates, or the feelings that it conveys, and so to do it in that sort of scientific, mathematical way is absolutely daft. But that's what I've tried to do. And anyway, it's resulted in a top 10, which probably, when I look at it, wouldn't have made too much difference if I'd let my heart and gut rule my head. I don't think the list would have looked much different. But anyway, here goes. So at number 10, I've actually got a joint number 10, which was a sneaky way of fitting in another one and holding up 11 albums. But at joint number 10, I'm delighted to say that Ringo has sneaked in there. And this is Ringo's, is it his third album, is it, I think? This is Ringo from 1973. And the reason I say I'm delighted is that Ringo is obviously not, in terms of songwriting, in terms of singing, he isn't the strongest of the quartet. In fact, he's by far the weakest. But what does happen, Ringo's albums aren't bad albums, they're entirely listenable, and that's because he plays with an all-star band. On this particular album, all of the Beatles feature on it, although not obviously all at once, but all at one time or another feature on this, plus supported by a cast of other top-line musicians. Mark Bolan even appears on this one, playing guitar on one or two tracks. So that's the first reason. He plays with brilliant musicians. The second reason, he gets songs donated by his friends, whether they're the former Beatles who donate him plenty, or other friends, people like Harry Nilsson and others, that give him decent songs. So he's got decent songs, he's got a brilliant band, he's got the money behind him to produce really nice packages. I mean, this one's lovely. It's got I'll show you the booklet from that goes within it. This is the lyric sheet, and for each song, I know you can't, oops, it's upside down as well as back to front. I know you can't read it because they're all back to front, but for each song on the album, there is a drawing by the bassist Klaus Voormann and Beatles friend Klaus Voormann, who does a really sweet drawing to go with each song. So it's lovely packaging. So decent songs, brilliant band, lovely packaging. Ringo sneaks in at number 10. Jointly at number 10 is George's second album, Living in the Material World from... No, it's not his second album, what am I saying? Third, I think. Third or fourth even. Living in the Material World from 1973. And this is George still very much in his spiritual phase. This is characterised, I think, this album by simple minimalist lyrics. A lot of the songs, or some of them, are... a lot of repetition of the same line, which I don't mind. I think that helps to create a sort of real vibe. I'm less keen on the sort of spiritual, sort of religious side of things. But, there's lots of strings and piano. There's some really good songs. Give Me Love, the album kicks off with, is a really nice track. So, good album. That's my joint number 10. George Harrison, Living in the Material World. At number 9 is George again. This is 6 years later. This is his eponymous album, George Harrison, from 1979. And this is very much a contented, just married, just become a father. There's a sort of subtlety, a lightness, a romanticism around this album, which is really, really nice. It's just a lovely album to listen to. It's maybe a touch over-polished in the production side of things, but lovely album. It's got the single Blow Away on it, and that's George Harrison, 1979. That's number 9. Number 8, George again. Very different though, this one. This is moving on 8 years to 1987. And this is Cloud 9, and by this time George had teamed up with Jeff Lynne of the Electric Light Orchestra, and some people thought that collaboration was a really good thing, other people less so. I'm in the former camp. I love Jeff Lynne's stuff. I think they were really a really good match for each other. It led to some really good stuff with the Wilburys and outside of this. And this album's got very much an ELO travelling Wilbury sort of sound to it. The spiritual stuff has gone by the board. These are just really a collection of really good songs. There's some great guitar interplay on here between George and his mate Eric Clapton. And yeah, really strong, very listenable, enjoyable album. George Harrison, Cloud 9. Number 7, Paul McCartney. This is his second album from 1971, Ram. This is a really nice collection of songs. The songs that I think grow on you the more you listen to them. I think the album has become more and more appreciated over time. It's his second album. It's got a really sort of homespun sort of limited production, which I quite like. Quirky lyrics. McCartney's singing is superb on this album. The album is maybe a little bit more Beatlesque than some of Harrison's and Lennon's early albums. But yeah, lovely stuff. Paul McCartney, Ram, 1971. Number 6, John Lennon, Sometime in New York City. This is where John Lennon uses the sort of newspaper format to display the lyrics and the song titles. Some good photos of the session on the inside cover. There are 2 albums included with this, but I didn't analyse or count the second album, which is really a sort of a bit of a mashup with Frank Zappa and the Mothers. It's interesting stuff in itself, but I've seen that as a sort of free giveaway with this album rather than part of the album itself. So I've only looked at the two sides of Sometime in New York City, and I love this album. I really do. I loved it when it came out in the 70s, and I continue to think it's one of John's strongest. The critics didn't love it so much and continue to criticise it on the basis that this is certainly John's most overtly political album, but they criticise it on the basis that his political messages are too forthright, that they're not subtle enough, that they're too much in your face, ramming it down your throat. Well, I disagree. I mean, I think some of the messages in here need to be rammed down people's throats. Whether that's the feminist messages from the opening track, Woman is the Nigger of the World, or whether that's the horror of Sunday Bloody Sunday, which I think John must have written immediately after that horrific event where 13, 14 people were killed, by the British Army, unarmed, innocent people, mowed down by the British Army on British streets in Derry in 1972. And obviously the media at the time and others trying to downplay that or whatever, and Lennon just wanted to, as I say, ram this down people's throats, and that's what he intended, and that's how it comes across. And I think a lot of the messages are just as relevant today. So I disagree with the critics. I think it's a great album. I think it was necessary at the time. It stands up today. Sometime in New York City, 1972. My number 5, a very, very different kettle of fish. Just a brilliant pop album. This is Paul McCartney and Wings, Band on the Run from 1973. And as I say, just a brilliant, brilliant pop album. And it's got the hit singles, Band on the Run and Jet. It's got great songs like Bluebird, Mamma. The whole album, it just sounds superb. McCartney played, I think, all the instruments, or just about all the instruments on that. And I think this stands up there with some of the Beatles' best pop stuff. It's lovely album. Brilliant, poppy, catchy, very, very listenable. Great stuff. Band on the Run, 1973, Paul McCartney and Wings. My number 4, back to John Lennon. This is Walls and Bridges from 1974. This was written during what's known as John Lennon's lost weekend. That is his 18-month, not a weekend, his 18-month separation from Yoko. And a lot of the songs on here are sort of written to Yoko. The album includes lots of artwork from John when he was 11 years old. There's a picture of his teacher. Other stuff there. Really good artwork, actually. So it reminds you that was his background, was art college and everything. But this is an album that it's another great sounding album. The band are on absolutely top form on the album. They're backed up with some guest appearances. Elton John's on there, Harry Nilsson pops up once or twice. And just a great selection again of John Lennon melodies. I think it's one of his strongest albums. Really good stuff. Walls and Bridges, 1974. Now the top 3, and at number 3, it is George Harrison. All Things Must Pass, George's debut album. And I think if evidence was ever needed that George Harrison's talent and his creative talent was underused in the Beatles, as he sat behind the huge egos of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, then this album is it. because it's a double album. I haven't counted the sort of third album that appears in the box, which is a sort of jam session. But I've looked at all the songs on the double album, and I can't remember how many songs there are now. My notes are here somewhere. I will get to it, but anyway, whatever it is, it's just a collection of absolutely brilliant songs, many of which, as I say, were written by George during the Beatles days. 18 songs, there we are. And a lot of them are just absolutely stunning. There's no fillers on here. It's just a superb album. And George, it was co-produced by George and Phil Spector. It's got that big Phil Spector sound on it. I love it, actually. I mean, on My Sweet Lord, for example, the sort of guitars are sort of ramped up there and create that big sort of sound with it. Some people don't like it so much, and in the new 50th anniversary edition that's just been released to mark 50 years since the release of this, then they've tried to de-spectorize it a little bit, I understand, and I'm not so sure that's a good thing, but this is it's great. George is on top form, lovely guitar, and especially slide guitar on here. I don't need to list the sort of outstanding songs, you'll be familiar with some of them, but this is All Things Must Pass, George Harrison, 1970. And then at number 2, I'm ashamed to say I haven't got this one yet on vinyl. This is John Lennon's Imagine from 1971. Everyone knows the title track Imagine, but generally this album just contains every song, stunning melodies, great lyrics. John Lennon goes from romantic to angry to cynical and back round again. Again, there's a great Spector production involved in it. And it's just brilliant stuff. It's one of the all-time great albums. It must be 50 years coming up later this year, I guess, since the release of this. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that and whether they bring out an interesting vinyl version. I'll have to keep my eyes open for that. But yeah, brilliant stuff. John Lennon, Imagine, 1971. And then my number 1 album from former Beatles is, again, it's John Lennon. It's Plastic Ono Band from 1970, his debut album. There's a young John on the inside, on the back. And this album, it's just an emotional roller coaster ride. I mean, the first 2 tracks just absolutely blow you away. The first track, Mother, I mean, you just want to break down and cry when you listen to it. It is absolutely, almost unbearably, almost unlistenable, because it just hits you that hard. This is John, his rawest, most emotional, most personal. I think he'd been going through what's called, scream therapy or whatever. He's just bearing his absolute soul. It's painful to listen to, and you think you can't go anywhere after the despair of track 1, but then track 2 tries to haul you back with hope, and the album just goes on like that as an emotional roller coaster ride. It is one of the most moving, emotionally difficult albums that you will ever hear. And in that sense, it's just a brilliant piece of art. The band are absolutely superb. There's only the 3 of them. There's John on guitar and piano and vocals, obviously. Klaus Vormann on bass and Ringo Starr on drums. And yet the sound they create and the variety of sound they create is really, really good. So this is just... It's not just one of the best albums by former Beatles. This is one of the truly great albums of all time, in my opinion. This is Plastic Ono Band from 1970 from John Lennon. Okay, so sorry I'm doing this on the laptop with everything back to front again. I did try with the camera there. earlier, but it cut me off on me 13 minutes. I'd only got to number 4, I think, so I've had to run it again. Hopefully I'll get these technical problems sorted out, and hopefully you might join me next time for my next top 10, which will probably be my top 10 Bob Dylan albums. Cheers, bye.